Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Tuesday to you. Um, as people are starting to get into class here and I'm taking attendance, I'm going to share kind of something unusual that I'm going to start doing more often. And I'm going to put a AP test question on the screen. And while I'm taking attendance, I'm just going to ask that you read the question. And then in a private chat, send me what you think is the correct answer. Okay. This is a stimulus-based question. Extremely highly likely it could be on the AP exam. So based on what you guys were supposed to have read for this week, let's see what you got. Okay. Give it a try. Okay, take maybe 15 more seconds here to try to make a prediction or a guess. And then what I want you to do is type your answer to me in a private message in the chat function. Just put the letter A, B, C, or D. All right. I don't see anybody's answers yet. Again, in the chat function, go ahead. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So about 19 out of 22 said B. That is the correct answer. Okay. So let's look at the explanation real quick before we move on. So told you exam alignment is high. This is a question that's very likely you would see. And then doesn't really tell me anything else. And I just wanted you guys to see that this would be highly likely that it was on there. It's Amerindians were killed in large numbers by diseases such as smallpox and measles. So I think I even asked you a question similar to that on your quiz yesterday. I just want you to get used to being able to analyze the passages and then apply that to a question. So that's good. Most of you got that correct. What kind of bias would William McNeill, or what kind of limitations on the sourcing would William McNeill, the world historian in 1976, have here? Okay, someone feel free to unmute.
That's like an English name, so I'm assuming he's European, so he wouldn't know all like he probably wouldn't know about exactly what's happening in the New World because he's on the other side.
Could be. I mean, he's probably potentially he is white, which means he's coming from the perspective of the victors. I'm with you on that. What about 1976?
Since it's like from 1976, he wasn't actually there, so he's writing after it's happened.
Exactly. So you could say that this could be an unreliable source because he's looking at another source and then writing down his own opinion. So that could, calling into question a source is one way to provide limitation or to source a document. So that's something that we're also trying to improve on. Okay, good. I'm going to try to zoom out on this. Let's see if I can do that successfully. There we go. Okay, and no, I don't want to do that. There we go. All right, so good job. We're going to go ahead and get started on the notes today. I just want to remind you that they are on Canvas, and I just uploaded it, so it's pretty similar to what I've got. And then once we get through this, I'll explain what the homework is this evening. Okay. Hopefully, I got a message from Lucy that said that 15 people were confused or more on the homework last night. So then I sent out an example. Hopefully that helped. And hopefully we can do a little bit better tonight with that. So I can take questions about that towards the end of class. All right, so let's take a look at our world map here. What two countries and their colonies or their areas of exploration are shown on the map? Does anyone want to raise their hand with the hand raise function and tell us? Ethan, what do you think?
Spain and Portugal.
That is correct. Spain and Portugal. You can see Portugal and Spain are on the Iberian Peninsula, and they were the first two to sail outside of Europe and establish huge presences in the Western Hemisphere and in large presence in areas of the Eastern Hemisphere that were less populated by major civilizations. Okay, good. All right, moving on here. What I wanted to show you guys first was a map from 1375. So this is called the Catalan Atlas. At the time, this was considered to be the most accurate map that Europeans had. It was made by a Jewish map maker near Majorca, Spain. And the center of the map, so this is an 8 different columns. Where's the center of the map? Okay, again, if you want to take a guess, go with the blue hand raise function. Where's the center? Hannah, what do you think?
It almost looks like the Mediterranean and like the Middle East.
Yeah, it's good. So Jerusalem is at the center of the map. Okay, so obviously there's a large chunk of the world missing here, and this is in 75. So the point of me showing you this is to show you that European maps and technology had to improve in order for them to be able to take risks to go on this age of discovery and exploration. All right, so the second thing that made it easier, and this is a poor picture quality, I apologize, is a caravel. Okay, there are a couple of advantages the caravel had. And again, this is stuff I might jot down. It's not necessarily on here, but if you look at the ship, you'll notice that it's got two triangular sails. Those are known as lateen sails. Lateen. I think that's on my screen later here, but the lateen sails made the ship able to sail into the wind. Okay, and it also combined kind of the speed of the Arab dhow with the ability to carry a bunch of cargo like the Chinese junk. And then on top of that, it didn't have to have a lot of people or men to man the ship. And so it was a low cost ship in terms of manpower, and it could carry a lot of goods for its size. And then it also could sail into the wind, which meant it was very quick as well, lightweight. Okay, so that's the Portuguese caravel. About 100 years later, the Spanish would improve on it, and you can see this is known as a Spanish galleon. Okay, so over time, as the maritime empires of Spain and Portugal grew, the Spanish in particular had to have a way to get their money and their gold and silver from the New World to Spain, so they created these huge treasure ships known as galleons. Okay, you can see how many more masts are on these. Typically 5 sails with the triangular sail in the back. You can see the back has the rudder. Looks almost like a Chinese ship, but faster and can sail into the wind. It has guns on it as well. All right, so what's the reason for exploring? Here you can see the inside of a Spanish merchant ship or a galleon. What are some reasons to explore? Let's cut right to the chase here. So, okay, so maybe we get some time to look at documents. Okay, so Constantinople fell in 1453. Okay, and when Constantinople fell, that meant that Christian traders that were in Italy and merchants that were in Venice and Genoa and Padua, they had to pay double or triple markups now from the Muslims to purchase goods from Asia. What goods in particular? Spices, silk from China, porcelain from China, and spices and was something that they had been accustomed to having. It was critical for church services in the Catholic Church, and it provided early type of perfume, made meat that was salted and taste pretty gross. It was old, that they could get it to last longer and taste better with these spices. So it was pretty important. So when the Mongols collapsed and the Turks took Constantinople, that meant that there was a problem for European trade. Okay. Secondly, then, in particular, the Iberian Peninsula, more land for growing cash crops. And so Portugal is going to take that first risk by sailing down the West African coast and colonizing the Azores, the Madeiras, and the Canaries Islands, which are going to provide them direct access to the gold and salt trade markets that were in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. Thirdly, then, the idea of spreading Christianity. Okay. Catholic Church was very powerful, and the Iberian Peninsula being a rivalry between the Portuguese and then this newly unified Castile and Aragon called Spain was going to lead to who could be the best Catholic. And then shortly after this, 1517, when Martin Luther posts the 95 Theses, it's going to turn into can we spread Protestantism or Roman Catholicism more around the world? So even at the article or a little snippet you'll read tonight about from Christopher Columbus, I mean, small desire to convert, but mostly due to the idea of making money, okay, as a motive. All right, so it's no surprise, and we've been talking about this for probably 2 or 3 weeks now, but since Rome fell and Europe fell into the Middle Ages, other civilizations had been increasing their technology and their commerce, okay, particularly China during the Tang and the Song, and then the Umayyad Caliphate was surpassed by the Abbasid Caliphate, which had their capital at Baghdad and was the center of a huge empire that stretched from Indonesia all the way across to Africa, and the tie being Islam. Now, that allowed the Europeans to, after the Crusades, and when you start to see the connection of the Silk Trade Route again, after the Crusades, that allowed for these ideas to migrate to Europe. A couple of the more important ones, the compass and the rudder, okay? Also the watertight bulkhead, okay? So you can close off an area of a ship and fix it and you don't have to flood the whole ship. From Islam, the triangular sail, which I was talking about, you guys can see the lateen sail here. And then the astrolabe was a Islamic instrument that was used for 300 different calculations of algebra and geometry and trigonometry. And then that was eventually used to figure out where a star was and then where a ship was, and so it could figure out where it was in its terms of its latitude. All right, other technology that's not on here, let's point out the obvious: gunpowder. In terms of improved map making, when the printing press gets to Johannes Gutenberg in the late 1400s, okay, China had already had a printing press, but this was one made out of metal that would greatly benefit learning. Also then, the obvious was the works of Aristotle and Plato that made their way over to Europe after the Crusades. All right, so that's going to allow for exploration. It is the Portuguese that get started first, and again, it's sailing down the African coast to get them access to Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, okay, and the gold markets of sub-Saharan Africa. And so, that being said, that caused a huge rivalry between Spain, which would unify in 1492, and Portugal, who's now bringing in this gold and salt that had long been traded, once or twice through the hands of Muslim traders and Berbers in North Africa, and now is coming straight into Portugal. And so this inspired one prince in particular called Prince Henry the Navigator to sponsor the first European university dedicated to maritime trade, okay, and to maritime adventure. Now, what that means is basically we would call it modern day like torture tactics, but he had these students who would buy in. He created a university instead of buying, and building a bunch of castles and whatnot. And he started to try to test things like how long can a sailor last at sea without food? Okay, how long, can you waterboard someone? You guys know what that is, I think. How long can you put someone underwater, and they can survive? Can people drink salt water and live? I mean, these are some tactics that obviously I've gone through a research class in master's school that you're not allowed to do anymore because you're harming your experiments, whatever your participants. But this is what the university was, and it gave Portugal the advantage then as they're able to, again, sail down the West Coast, call it for themselves, and that's going to spark Spain to kind of jump in and take a risk on Christopher Columbus, who was obviously a terrible person, and we can talk about him in a second. Okay, but other areas of exploration, and I want you guys to make sure you at least jot these down. I'm not going to go into a diatribe about them because we'll come back later. India, Da Gama, 1498. Brazil, Cabral, he washed up there. He was trying to get to the tip of Africa and washed up in Brazil and was like, oh, this is cool. Indonesia and the Spice Islands, which the Portuguese will claim for themselves. That's a big one. And then Macau in China, and then also Japan then in 1542. So this is going to give them the basis. If you notice, though, most of these outside of Brazil are located in the Eastern Hemisphere. Okay, that's one of the easiest ways to remember the Portuguese. And the Portuguese and the Spanish, for the most part, are going to leave each other alone. I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, let's go to the Spanish then. Christopher Columbus was Italian, had been in jail, had pleaded to his case that he could figure out how to find the Indies and the Spice Islands from Europe. He actually washed up. His ship was sunk, and he washed up on shore of Portugal, and ended up convincing the Spanish Queen and King Ferdinand and Isabella to finance his trip to the Americas. And so using caravels, Columbus would make 4 trips before he was thrown back in jail for brutally treating the natives. But 4 trips, he found the Caribbean islands, South America, and then Central America, and what is modern day Dominican Republic and Haiti, which he called Hispaniola. Okay. The Spanish wouldn't stop there. Then obviously Florida and St. Augustine was founded in 1513. The Aztecs were conquered shortly after. The Inca were conquered by Pizarro, and the Philippines, which is very, very important. I didn't look at the stats on the question yet, but what religion is practiced in the Philippines? The main religion is Roman Catholicism. And that's because of Spanish influence. And the Philippines, why they were so valuable was that was the direct access to trade with China. And if I haven't said it enough, China has the products that people want. Okay. In a sense, it hasn't changed all that much since 1500. China still has the products people want. Just a matter of how do you get it. All right. Moving on here, just for time purposes. Okay. That's the Iberian Peninsula, and that's going to lead to a competition then between Portugal and Spain. And so instead of going to war, the Pope jumps in 1494, and in Portugal and Spain agree the line that the Pope sets that Portugal will get everything east of the line of demarcation, and Spain will get everything west of the line of demarcation. Okay, line of demarcation is another fancy word for just a line on a map where you divide 2 things. Okay. Now, what this meant though was, like today, they speak Portuguese in Brazil, but in Argentina they speak Spanish. even though those two countries are right next to each other on a map. And that's because this of the Treaty of Tordesillas. And so Portugal will pretty much be content outside of Brazil with its holdings on the continent of Africa, and then in India, and then in the Spice Islands. And what you see is Spain then is going to take advantage, we'll read about this later, but they're going to take advantage of their new position, and they're going to exploit what we call the New World, but what is South America, Central America, and portions of North America also. Now, what's controversial about this Treaty of Tordesillas? You've got 50 million people or more living in these areas, and there's no regard given to the native people that live there. I think you guys understand how wrong that is in terms of history. Okay, you have complex civilizations, religions, peoples that are completely, their culture is completely ignored, and the Pope then, as his position of power, gets in and says, yeah, go ahead and you take this half and you take this half, and we're all going to celebrate then and have Thanksgiving dinner. That's terrible. They didn't have Thanksgiving then yet either, but still bad. I think you guys get it. Okay. Here you go. Here's the map that you guys are going to be looking at today. The red line indicates the line of the Treaty of Tordesillas. And you can see how poorly proportionate this map is made. Not how much description it's lacking, but yeah, okay. So that's going to thing you're going to do a soapstone on today. I think you guys will get the background since we just talked about it. Okay, let's go to the English real quick then, okay? The English are going to sail down Canada and the east coast of North America by 1500. But their real claims and their real ground that they set their foot hard on North America is when they defeat the Spanish in what's known as the Spanish Armada in 1588. And that was, we'll talk about it, but that's when Spain sent their entire navy to try to invade England because Queen Elizabeth had said that she was not going to convert back to Catholicism, that she was going to continue to keep the Kingdom of England a Protestant country. And so what we call the Siglo de Oro, the golden century of Spain, is basically 1492 to 1588. And even though they'll have a massive presence in the New World for a long time after that, obviously the British, the English are going to take gains from them. And so in the Caribbean, the British set up sugar plantations, which end up causing the demand for millions of slaves and putting a pretty big footprint for the English in the Caribbean. And then the British East India Company, I'm going to usually refer to this as the BEIC, okay? This along with the Dutch East India Company, was one of the first joint venture stock companies ever created. If you don't know what that means, you're in the same boat as I was probably about a year ago. A joint venture stock company is a company where individuals can invest in it, and they essentially set their own rules for how they traded. The government granted them permission to do this, but they used their own soldiers. They used their own, when they took over areas, colonized areas, they set up their own government. And as long as it was profitable, individual investors who invested in the original company got paid dividends on the amount of stock that they made. And Britain was okay with it. The Queen and King were good with it because they got paid a percentage of taxes on ships that came back. And so it was a win-win for the investor, win for Britain in terms of tax money, win for Britain in terms of fame. And yet they had to take almost nominal to no risk to pay for it. Who got hurt in this whole ordeal? It's going to be the same answer all day today. The natives. Okay, so in the British East Indian Company, the BEIC, it is the people of India and surrounding islands that are going to have to deal with the British. All right, the French are going to get pretty close to home here in the old Indiana. Okay, we'll explore the Hudson River basin, and then claim the Great Lakes for themselves and sail down the Mississippi River. And New Orleans is named after a French city. And you're going to see the French claim is pretty strong. Quebec City, New France, had a lot of French settlers as well. And they will grow their colonies in the Americas, in North America, until the 7 Years' War. And 1756 to 1763. You guys have probably learned about it in middle school last year. You probably called the French and Indian War, though. That's my guess. Okay, but the global name for that is the 7 Years' War. All right. The Dutch. Not many people know about the Dutch because obviously they get on the scene a little bit later. If you notice, most of their areas they explored were in the 1600s. And that's partially due to the fact that they were controlled by Spain until after the War of like Spanish Succession. And they're able to, and there's all these religious wars in Europe. We're going to get super bogged down in it in a couple weeks. But basically, they're Protestant also. They're Calvinists. And so they are able to split away from Spain and the Habsburg family. And then that gives them kind of the golden ticket to go out and explore. And they'll end up taking the Spice Islands from the Portuguese, and that becomes an absolute cash cow for the Dutch. I'm sure you guys have heard that they sailed New York, which was originally New Amsterdam, and then sold it to the British. And they also were the first ones to sail down to or across to Australia and South Africa. They started also arguably maybe earlier than the British. They started the Dutch East India Company, which was, again, a joint stock venture company that worked on exploiting the areas that they claimed and making money off it with low risk to the government. All right, I've got 11 minutes. We're moving. Okay, I hope you guys are doing okay. So that's going to set up this thing known as the Columbian Exchange. I'm sure you've heard of it before, but that's the exchange of flora and fauna from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas. Now, this is a debate we usually have in class. Sometimes you can say that, you can argue that this is, and the consequences were negative, overtly negative, because of the mass amount of death that it caused. But if you look at the alternative side of it, you can also say that it was overtly positive because over time it's caused huge population growth due to the exchange of plants and animals that flourished in other areas. All right, so what I was going to do was have you guys get a little participation here. We've only got 10 minutes, which is okay. But can you guys think of, let's talk about some negatives first. Okay, let's go hand raise. I'm looking at it on here. So Lucy, can you give us a negative?
Yeah, a negative is that diseases were spread.
Okay, good. Kaylee.
Oh, that was what I was gonna say.
Okay, it's all right. Lily, what do you think?
There's a bunch of like deforestation and bad things that happen to crops in the New World.
Good. That's good for the environment. Theme 1, nice. Anybody else on negatives? Hannah.
Didn't that essentially also like start the like importation of slaves like to the Americas like through the Columbian Exchange, and
Bingo.
that was really fundamental like to obviously like the African population, and can still like affects countries to this day.
Correct. So the Columbian Exchange caused that labor system, and definitely can be considered a negative. Okay, Jill, what do you think?
Because of the spread of diseases, a lot of indigenous and Native Americans lost their lives and had a lot of their groups and families like get moved out of their native lands.
Yeah, yeah, and you definitely had cultural decimation or destroying of cultures, certainly. All right, let's go positives. What were some positives that came out of this? Ashton.
There's spread of culture.
Okay, so even though it might have been negative, the spread of culture and the spread of steel weapons and horses and different foods could be considered positive. Okay, Vincent.
I was gonna say, yeah, not really spread of culture, but spread of like different utilities such as like steel weapons and that stuff. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, horses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Technology too. Yeah. Anything else for positive? It seems like this class would overtly say negative. Samuel?
Livestock.
Yep. So livestock in the Americas now. Definitely. All right. So it whether you want to say it's positive or negative, the exchange that was started and then grew totally changed how the world's fabric would look. Okay. And the next 5 or 6 chapters we'll spend just talking about how it changed and what it changed. So just wanted to get you guys the ball rolling a little bit here. Good job. So let's take a look at some other big ticket items then. Okay. Towards a global economy, they use some goofy word in the book like proto-globalization. I used to have that as a vocab word, and I'd always laugh because it's okay. What it means is countries that explored and then started to colonize started to practice an economic system known as mercantilism. Okay, and usually I'll be writing on the board now and screaming at you, but I'm not now. Just being nice. Gold and silver is key. That's bullion. Okay. So the amount more bullion, the more gold and silver you have, the higher position you are. And so you charge tariffs for any country that wants to buy your stuff. And then you collect raw materials from your colonies and you make them buy your stuff. And so this leads to the government becoming very wealthy, as well as the people of status, the aristocrats and the former nobles who could afford to invest in these stock companies to become very, very wealthy as well. And so there's a reason why we call this the age of absolutism in Europe, because European kings and queens are going to make filthy amounts of money on the exploitation of unfree labor around the world. Basically, the Europeans forcing other people to work, not freely. And so the next thing I wrote was inequality in capital letters. For the first time now in the history of the world, unfree labor is going to supply the world's good and trade at the highest it had been, by 1550, 1600. And unfree labor means, slavery. It could mean just forced to work for little pay, etc. Okay. All right. We'll come back to these other two, the Cape Colony, the continent of Africa. We'll talk about that in a second. Cape Colony's on the tip of South Africa. This was meant to be a trading port and a stop for the Dutch. And then it ended up being a kind of a farming community where they enslaved natives, and then it grew from there. And the British took it over at the end of at the beginning of the 1800s. The 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, that'll come back again in this course, but believed to be kind of the precursor to the world wars because it was fought on every continent. And it was between the British and the French, and then everybody else in Europe got involved too. And it ended up giving the British a sizable advantage in India and in North America. Okay, I think I've got maybe two other things for you. Yep. Okay, I've got to hurry up. All right, so Asian reactions. We're going to talk about this, okay? But to China, this was a major boost in silver and gold for the Chinese, okay? They, even though they were importing major amounts of silver and gold, they still were controlling trade on their own in this time period, 1450 to 1750, okay? That's important. Japan, once the British and the Dutch showed up, they said, no, we're going to forbid the West to have any influence here. And so Japan shuts themselves off except for really guns. And they only allow entrance into like two ports. We'll talk about him. One, the Shima, Nagasaki. Okay, India then, on the other hand, does not live the same fate as China and Japan. And their foreign trade ports are open. I think you can accredit it to the fact that you had a Muslim-Hindu divide in India, and the British and the French would gradually take over more and more Indian princes. And the empire that was there that we haven't learned about, the Mughal, will generally weaken, and that just leaves the door open for the British and the French to fight, and they do. And the British start to assume more and more control over India. All right, last but not least then, I guess I can't spend too much time on this, but colonization patterns. North America became more like Europe and had more European settlers and was influenced by the Enlightenment, self-rule. South America was dominated by the Spanish. Two capital cities at Lima and Mexico City. India, like I said, little settlers, British East India Company dominated India until the British felt like they had to go in the 1800s and actually govern it themselves, but tons of money. And then Africa, very little settlement outside of the Cape Colony. The Europeans were not strong enough to enter into the interior of Africa, and they were ignorant, and they had no clue what was in the interior of Africa. And so Africa would continue to be used in this time period as a means to bribe slave traders into bringing people to the coast to trade for slaves, which we'll get into later. Okay, sorry, I got to go through this fast. I just want to show you guys what your homework is. It's not going to be too exhaustive, but yesterday I showed you the soapstone, and I got to find, oh, here we go. You're going to do two tonight on your own, okay? The two soapstones that you're going to do tonight on your own are under modules and under chapter 15 soapstone practice, or sorry, 915 soapstone practice, chapter 17. Okay, so I have a blank soapstone. You're going to fill out both columns, the left side and the right side. One is a reading about a journal from Christopher Columbus. The other one is the map, or sorry, a picture of Pizarro taking over Cuzco, which was, the original capital of the Inca Empire. All right, that's about it, guys. That's what you got to do tonight. Make sure it's turned in. I wrote, I think, on here by the start of class tomorrow, okay? You guys are free to leave. Thank you, everybody.